Ritualistically, the goat is both an important signifier of the Roman and Jewish tradition. Could you highlight these traditions and the relationship between the Roman, Jewish and Bavarian priesthood?
There is a very close relationship between particularly the Roman priesthood and the Judaic priesthood, and the interface between this was the Greek Empire. But when we start looking at the etymologies within the Latin language, we see direct parallels also within the Judaic traditions. So for example, if we look at Capitol Hill, which was the temple of Jupiter in the Latin, Jupiter's name was Jovis or Jovis. This word is etymologically consistent with Jehovah. The Hebrew word for Jupiter was Sedek, which is a homonym which means justice. So Jupiter is both the god of justice, as in the Roman pantheon. Sedek is punned with Zadok or Zadix, which interconnects with symbolically with the innocent or the firstborn, which is bought or purchased. Sometimes this would be represented by the lamb or by the goat. So within the Roman mysteries we have got Capitol, which denotes the temple. We've got Capra, which is a goat, and in addition we have got Caput, which is the head. Okay, the Jewish festival, the Passover, we have the Paschal lamb. This etymology is from Paschal, which means crime, and the lamb was seen as the innocent blood. Additionally, we also have the scapegoat within the Jewish traditions, and this is interconnected or interlinked with the lamb or the goat found in the Roman traditions. So for example, Capitol Hill is relative to Capra, which is a goat, and is connected to Capitol, which also is the temple, but is also money, which is identified with a ransom or payment for the purchase of sin. In English we find the analogy between goat, God, because the morphologically the T and the D are very closely aligned. So we have God, goat. We also have the word good. This would be found in the English word rite, which is a homonym for rite, meaning a ritual or a blood ritual, from the word rita, meaning red, the Sanskrit word. Additionally, we can also see the idea between proper or appropriations, which is a sacrifice. In the Hebrew language, Edin, which is means delight, is connected to din, the verb to give. That's in the Akkadian language. In the original Arabic, the word din means religion. So there's very much an association between religion and between blood sacrifice. The sacrifice of the lamb symbolises the innocent or the child. Again, the lamb signifier, as is found with the goat, which tends to signify the woman or the priestess, is connected with hair signifiers. Hair is a symbol of the mammal, is a symbol of the priest, and is a symbol of man.
You imply in your book that the dragon is central to the mysteries. Could you divulge what you mean?
The mysteries is identified with transfiguration of angelic forms, and this is very much connected to blood drinking and to the idea of appropriations of the firstborn. Within the Greek traditions we see reference to this with the Paean feast. The word Paean, invocation, it's closely aligned to poen, which means pain or to suffer. This in the Christian traditions is transferred to the traditions of the Passion, from the stem pas, which is to suffer. Jesus is deemed or is represented as the scapegoat, and is sacrificed. He is presented as an innocent ransom. His blood is spread across the lintel as with the Passover lamb, and so we see that there is a direct theological connection between the Passover and the death of the innocent lamb, which was represented as the Egyptian firstborn, and Jesus, who was crucified or sacrificed within the Greek traditions. It's interesting to note with the Paean feast that the etymology of Paean is very closely aligned to the deity Pan. Pan is a goat, and so we see that the scapegoat is interconnected both with the innocent scapegoat of Jesus, but also with the deity Pan. The word pan in the Greek is often rendered as the word feeder. We see that Pan is depicted as a copulator, and the idea that Pan is a copulator interconnects both with the idea of feeding within the mystery religions, but is an etymology which is derived from the Semitic noun pin, denoting a penis. So we see with the resurrection or the divine birth of Jesus is connected to the death of the goat. The goat was also hung within the temple itself, within the Jewish temple. The goat skin would be dyed red and would be hung in the temple. This esoterically was used to represent the Serim, which was a red goat or a bipedal-like angelic goat form, usually identified with the human angelic bloodline. So we have the signifier both of hare and of the reptile. And this, as I mentioned earlier, is identified with the matriarch and with divine birth. So with the deity Pan, for example, we have got the word paean, which is invocation. We've got poen, which is to suffer, and we've also got the word fein, which is very closely related, which means a spirit or a serpent. The Egyptian word fenu was used to denote a serpent, and the idea of a spirit connected to the serpent is often very analogous and very closely aligned.
So you're saying that the dragon, a type of angel, is connected to the human angelic lineage, symbolised as the goat. Could you explain what the signifier of the goat means?
I think we'll look at the theological ideas of the goat first of all, and then we will delve into the idea that the goat is actually a symbol of an angel. The first thing which we need to look at is the Greek word tragios, which is a goat, and where we get the word tragedy from. And this is very much aligned to the scapegoat and to the innocent lamb, or the death of the innocent lamb, which was identified with the death of the firstborn, or the Egyptian firstborn. Now when we go into the etymologies, we go into the word atonement, which is to ask for forgiveness. The word atonement, in its literal sense, comes from the Hebrew word kafara, which means atonement, and is related to the word kafel, which means a double in the Hebrew. Now these words, kafel, a double, and kafara, when we switch around the P and the F found in the Indo-European languages, we find is closely related to the Latin noun capra or caper, which is a goat. So we can see that the atonement of the goat, which in its original context meant a double, which was the materialization of the double or the angelic form. In the Latin word of atonement, the word comes from the word one-ment. One-ment means literally at one. So we see that there's a corruption or a reversal of the symbolism. Within the Latin idea of the word of atonement, we've got the idea of the unification between the goat and the human being, which would have been symbolized through sexual intercourse, whereas within the Hebrew idea of the etymology of atonement, we've actually got the realization of the double, the kafel, which is connected to kafara, atonement, or the expiation of the goat. This originally would have been through the blood of the goat or the blood of the innocent child. Kafara, atonement, with the switch between the k sound and the h or sound, is also related to hafa, which is a serpent. So we see that kafara, which is atonement, and kafel, which is the double, appertains to afa, which is a serpent or a viper. The serpent is a personification of the dragon or the fallen angel. There are other word plays also related. We can see that the Serim was originally a type of angel depicted as a goat. The word Serim means a red goat. We can see also within the Greek the word chimera, which is a goat, where you get the word chimera from, which is the progeny between a human and an angel. The chimera interconnects within the Arabic to kemi, which is a type of tent, which would have been the tabernacle, which was identified with the death of the goat or the sacrifice of the goat. Now, chimera is interconnected with the Latin word chimilla, which is a votaress at a sacrifice. So we see that the priestess is often connected with the signifier of the goat, which is closely aligned with the serim, which is a personification of the human angelic bloodline. It's perhaps also important to note here that the chimera, which was a she-goat, is also aligned in the Arabic to alchemia, which is alchemy. So the goat is very much identified with angelic transfiguration of alchemy. So we see the relationship between the goat. Sometimes in satanic cults, the goat is materialized as a human being. This is important because the goat is identified with hair. In the Latin, capillus, which is hair, again interconnects with the priestess or the goat, which is the capra, which is a female goat, or capra, which is a goat. Capra, caper, these are all etymologies which are aligned to hair signifiers and to the goat, which defines the mammal priest. Chimera, she-goat, is connected to the tent, chema or chema, which was identified with the tabernacle, and the Old Semitic word for the Pleiades is chem, which is used to define the Pleiades. We see a relationship between the tent chema or chema and the priest choma. So we see a relationship between the tabernacle, the priest, the goat, and the priestess. The Greek word chemia or chimera, a she-goat, is connected to chema or chema, a tent. The Arabic word, these are symbols of the tabernacle. We can also see within the Knight Templar traditions the Baphomet. Traditionally the Baphomet was a severed head. We see that the word Baphomet is a pun on the word Bath, which means a daughter, and Mavet, which is a daughter of death. By implication, the daughter of death was the Camilla or the Votarus, which was connected to Chimera, which was a goat. Hence we see the depiction of the Baphomet represented as the goat. The goat personifies the human angelic line, which is the serim, which is the line which is combined between the reptile and the mammal.
Before we move on to the last section, which looks at the angelic lineage and its relationship to the changeling, can we first look at the symbol of the pyramid and its original meaning?
We'll go into the Arabic word of what the word pyramid means. Egyptologists traditionally define the pyramid as a tomb, and there is no evidence for this. And indeed, when we actually look at the inscriptions within the Book of the Dead, and we look at the statues, we see that the pyramid is closely related to the genital organs, and there's a reason for this. The Arabic word haram, which means pyramid, is connected to the harem. So the pyramids were harems, and they were used as a meeting point between deities and between human beings. The human angelic bloodline, which was conceived as the pharaoh, this bloodline was represented as the pyramid. So hence we have the connotation of the pyramid, which implies knowledge. Now, haram, there is a number of interesting plays here as well. Judaic traditions say that the Jewish people were enslaved, or the Hebrews were enslaved, and we see this with the pun itself, because ha-ram means the grief, so the pyramid is connected to grief. Now, the pyramids were used as harems or royal chambers, and they were used for copulation. The Greek word pyramid comes from the Arabic word paro amud. Paro amud means Pharaoh's column. So the pyramid is represented as a column. Now, we can see that there are a number of interesting word plays in operation here, because when we go back to the original word haram, a pyramid, we see that there is a connection with Hammon, which is the host. This is the angelic host, and we can see also that the host is connected to the reptile and the rapist.
In esoteric literature, you mention the builders designate an angel, a being connected both to the traditions of the pyramid and Atlantis. Perhaps you could give your views on Atlantis.
Before we talk about Atlantis, we really need to look at paradise, because the traditions regarding paradise are central to understanding the mythology of Atlantis. So first of all, the Persian word paradise literally means a walled enclosure. The word peri means around, and diesa is a wall. In addition, we can see that there is a pun here with the Persian word peri, which means a serpent, which means the serpent race, and this is actually intrinsic to also understanding the traditions of Adam and Eve, and Adam being cast out from the Garden of Eden. Paradise is a translation from the Akkadian word Edin, which means a raised terrace or a stepped platform. This actually connotes a temple, because we also have the word Edin, which means an house of offering. So we can see relationships also within the Arabic as well. The word din in Arabic means religion. So all these traditions fit together. And additionally, when we look at the word plays with walls, we find other interesting facets as well. So for example, the Hebrew word koma, a wall, is punned with koma, a priest, and kama, the moon. So the traditions of the raised terrace or Eden is very much identified esoterically with the moon. As I mentioned throughout this video, the moon is signified as a receptacle which contained the seed of man. In the Arabic, additionally, we find that the Arabic word sur, a wall, is punned with sur, meaning mystery, and is identified with the serim, which is the human angelic bloodline. Traditionally, the wall is also used as a receptacle for storing sacred knowledge. So often Qurans or scriptures are often buried or contained within the foundation of the wall. And we see that this is a tradition also aligned to the traditions of Osiris, which is connected to the foundation. The foundation, a symbol of the covenant, which is central to the theology of Judaism.
Can you give a breakdown of the name Atlantis?
Atlantis is first mentioned in Plato's account, Critias, in which he talks about the destruction of Atlantis. The traditions of Atlantis are very much connected to paradise. In Critias's account, for example, Atlantis is described as a circle, and we are left in no doubt that the circle is used as a device or a symbol of a planet. The circle additionally is connected to both paradise, as in the walled enclosure, the circular walled enclosure, which is a symbol of the planet, but the circle is also used to denote the serpent. So this is basically a tradition which is identified with the war between the fallen angelic line, personified as a dragon or a serpent. The name Atlantis is a derivation from Atlo, which means to bear or suffer together. Atlo additionally suggests that this etymology is related to Tyro, who married the fish deity Poseidon. This is interesting because we see here that there is a destruction between humans and between the serpent, which is a theme picked up in the traditions of Adam and Eve, in which the Eve consummates a relationship with the serpent and then is cast out from the Garden of Eden. As we said before, Eden itself is another variation of the circular or walled enclosure, which is identified with the builder, used metaphorically to denote an angel, and is identified with the traditions of Atlantis. Further, Tyro seems to be connected to the Egyptian etymology tri, which means to obliterate or destroy completely. This is picked up in the Greek etymology, Troy, which was the city. Again, the relationship between Troy and Atlantis suggests that the two traditions may have been closely connected together. And again, when we return back to the biblical stories, the biblical narratives, we see that there is a relationship with the etymology of Adam in the Arabic, which suggests the red earth, which is connected to Mahadim, meaning Mars. and hadam, which means to destroy. So we see again that these traditions are very much connected with the angelic bloodline and the destruction or the wars between the angels and man, which was initially based on copulation and initiatory knowledge. These traditions go all the way back to Atlantis and Eden and to the temple. The enactment of these traditions is very much connected with the copulation between angels and the propagation of the angelic bloodline. It's also worth mentioning that Jupiter's son Tantalus is an anagram of Atlantis. Tantalus in this tradition would suggest that Atlantis is located with one of the moons of Jupiter, its destruction identified with the asteroid belt.
In Masonic law, you argue the builder denotes an angel and is connected to the worship of Venus. Could you elaborate?
Within the Egyptian and Roman mystery schools, Venus is a symbol of the king who is resurrected. As we mentioned earlier, Venus is used as a code word which is identified with the star system Sirius. So there is obviously an alignment there with the star Sirius. The progeny of the king, however, is connected very clearly with the descendants of Orion. They themselves are the Nephilim. Now the builder, Nagar in the Aramaic, is a pun. Jesus is said to have been descended from Joseph, who was a carpenter. The Aramaic word Nagar, a carpenter, is punned with Nogar, Venus. So we see here that the builder is represented as the carpenter. We can see also the analogy with the Arabic word Amar, which is a builder, which is identified semantically with the angel Amar, which means to talk, because the angel is described as a messenger or a talker. So the builder is identified both with talking and is identified with the angel or the materialization of a being embodied as the star Venus. In the book of Revelations, Jesus is referred to as the morning star, Luxfer. Luxfer is given in other translations or editions of the Bible as Lucifer. So we can see that Jesus is represented as Nagar, a carpenter. We can see that Nagar is a pun on Nogar, Venus. The etymology of Nagar is closely related to Naga. Now Naga is a homonym because in the Arabic and the Syrian language, Naga means to save, but it also means to hit or strike. So through death, Jesus is resurrected. In the traditions also, in Matthew 26, in which his accusers lay blame to Jesus, and which his accusers mock him, saying that Jesus is able to resurrect the temple, we see that there are interesting word plays. For example, in the Hebrew, talalit, which means the third, in which Jesus claims that he is able to resurrect himself on the third day, talalit is a pun on talalit, which means a prayer shawl. So we see that the prayer shawl here is a reflection of the 613 laws, which are the tassels, and we can see that Jesus was actually making claim that he was going to resurrect the Jewish law. In addition, we can see a relationship with the idea of the temple, because Jesus himself is crucified on Golgotha, which is the skull. The skull is connected to the temple, which is the organ of thought, which is identified with the destruction of the temple and the beginning of, or the creation of the new law.
Could you now just underline the connection between the angel and builder?
Yes, semantically the word angel, malak, is a derivation from amar, meaning to speak. So the angel is described as a talker. The word amar, however, is also a homonym. It means to build. So the angel can be depicted either as a builder or a talker. The builder is represented in Masonic law, and so the mason encapsulates the builder, which is identified with the angel. Further, the etymology amar, which means to build, is derived from the Egyptian root amal, meaning to do, and is connected to Amir, a prince. So we see a relationship both with the angel and the royal bloodline identified with a builder. Now, there are interesting word plays and word associations which are attributed to the builder. For example, the angel Malak can be connected to Malaka, meaning work, and we see that there is also a relationship with the Arabic word afa and the Hebrew word lahafel, to work. In addition, the word Saba, a painter, is punned with the word Sabaoth, meaning the host. So all these definitions show that the angelic host, the angel, or the bloodline of the angel, which we've identified with the sailor or the king, is identified with the builder. Now, the builder is used as a metaphor identified with regeneration, and is connected to shape-shifting and physical materialization of an angel. In the mysteries, this is represented as the king's ability to take on the form of an angel, typically represented as a dragon. So the builder becomes a metaphor for the idea of shape-shifting, or the idea of taking on a form. This idea is contained within etymologies as well. So, for example, the Latin word paneer, which is to build, is connected to the Greek word fein, a serpent. And we see the idea of rebirth, which is contained with the matriarch. We mentioned that Amir, the prince, is connected to Amar, meaning a mother. And in the Greek, Hamar or Haima means blood, and is connected to the Arabic root Hamar, meaning red. So the red mother is represented as a scarlet or a menstrual priestess. The bloodline of the scarlet or the menstrual priestess is synonymous with the king and the genealogy of the angel and the king. So we see these relationships which are identified with the birth of a changeling. In the Hebrew language, for example, Ruach, a demon, is connected to Rechem, meaning a womb. In the Latin language, the host, which is the angelic host, is connected to Hostus, which means streams of blood. Typically, this was referential to menstrual blood, as the etymology Hostus is derived from the Greek root hustera, which means a womb.
Can you give me a little more information on the dragon as a changeling or shapeshifter?
To understand this, we need to go back to the etymology of angel. The word malak is a derivation, according to rabbinic sources, from amar, which means to talk. Here we see that the angel is represented in the Greek as angelos, a talker. In addition, though, amar is a homonym and also means to build, so we can see that the angel is also depicted as a builder. The idea of the builder is connected to both talking and to creation and to the materialization of angelic forms. We find relationships also within the Greek. So, for example, the Greek word phonin, which is to speak, is connected to fein, which is a type of phantom. This etymology is a derivation from the Egyptian root phenu, which is a serpent. The idea is obviously connected to invocation, connected to the materialization of angelic forms. Further, we can see also that there is a relationship with the king and the builder or talker. So, for example, hakim, which is the Arabic word for a sovereign, is related to the Syrian root haka, meaning to talk, and akan, a seraph. So we see here that there is very much a relationship between the king and the seraph, identified with talking. At an abstract level, the double is represented as the word, but the word or the double, which is a construct, is identified with the craftsman or the builder, and these are all metaphors for the changeling. And we see in many traditions, whether this is Chinese, Indian, Greek traditions, the relationship between the king and also the idea of shape-shifting. The king, it is said, according to Persian tradition, could take on and materialise the form of a serpent. Again, we find similar ideas also contained within the Chinese. So, the word is used to represent the double, which is a form which is connected to the fame, which is a materialised phantom. This in itself is connected to Fenu, which is a serpent. In the Indo-European etymologies, we see that the word double is a derivation from daber, to talk, which is connected to debir, a sanctuary, and daber, a sacrifice. These etymologies themselves are connected to diva because through the morphology of the switch between the V and the B sound in the Arabic, we see that the word devil and diva are all identified with this sanctuary debir and talking daber. And this is essentially connected to the materialization of an angelic being, conceptual to the word or the double.
Can you give a definition of a changeling in the mystery schools?
Well, traditions of the changeling actually originate from Genesis. In chapter 3, the serpent is described as more subtle than any beast of the field. The beast of the field here implies man, whereas subtle in this context would imply the serpent's ability to transform or change shape. We find in the Latin that the word substitute is very much connected to the builder as well. We see also in the mystery schools that there is a relationship with the substitute. This is rendered in the Latin as suppositus and is from the word posita, which means a builder. So we find that there is a direct relationship between the substitute, which was used in the esoteric traditions to refer to a sacrifice, typically of a lamb, but in double talk a lamb is used to denote a child, and the identification of the angel being able to take on a human shape or form. In the Latin dictionary, the scholar Troperman mentions the word changeling is rendered with the word subditus. Ditus itself is connected to the Latin word dictus, which means to speak, and ditos, which is a double. So, to summarise, the double itself is represented as the word, and the word is connected to an angel or the materialization of an angel. Esoterically, the word is identified with sacrifice and the materialization of a form, which is an etymology itself connected to feign, a materialization, and fenu, which is identified with the serpent, dragon or angel.
You mentioned the emerald tablets. Could you please explain what they are and why you quote them?
The emerald tablets are said to originate from the patron Thoth, and they were discovered or translated in the 1920s. It is the author's contention, however, that these are obviously a recent forgery, but we should not dismiss them just because they are a forgery, because this information was released, I believe, by the hidden priesthood, and so contained within the tablets themselves, they contain a metaphysical truth. We find that there is analogies or relationships between the idea of the serpent, which is able to take on a human form or embody the form, and this is an idea which is connected in the Semitic traditions to the Anguagina, the serpent race, which we've talked about. Was labelled with the Theban and the Theban monarchy, and this idea that the serpent can embody a human form is a tradition which is found throughout the Middle East. We find it in the Mediterranean, throughout India and throughout China. So these ideas are found universally throughout all cultures. To close on this, Within the Emerald Tablets, there's a relationship between the idea of sound, which is connected to shapeshifting, and this, as we looked at earlier, is very much identified with the angel connected to the word. The word is used at an abstract level to represent the double, which is a construct or a form, which is identified esoterically with the mason, the angel, the dragon, or the king.
Do you have anything else to add before we close the interview?
At this point, I would just really like to emphasise that I advocate world peace, that I am not affiliated to any society whatsoever, that I am an independent research, that I've spent 7 years looking at the etymologies within the Indo-European languages, and that basically, as men, we have to stop being divided, and we have to see clearly that we are being divided by the shaitani, or the fallen angels, which are identified with the power structures, which are identified with the governments and the monarchical structures, and basically we have to live together, and we have to learn to love one another, and we have to move towards world peace. And the only way we can do this is obviously through being aware of how we are being controlled and how we are being manipulated. I wish you all peace. Thank you.